year. We gon' give them what they came for. We gon' take it up from last year. Shoot 'em my shot, boy, I'm long range. Me and the team on the same thing. Stayed down, never switched up. Only thing changed was the game. I'm in the zone now. Nothing can change what we on now. When I pull up, know it's going down. Foot on the gas, ain't no slowing down. Aiming for greatness, no settling. Kick down the doors, they won't let me in. Taking no L's, yeah, I gotta win. Watch me kick down the doors, they won't let me in. Who running the game now? Foot on the gas, can slow down. No, my team, we holding it down. We know we running it now. Watch the game change. Watch the game change. Watch the game change. Watch the game change, yeah. Watch the game change. Watch the game change. Watch the game change. Watch the game change. I do not gamble, but bet on me. Tell them that's life, yeah, it's still of it. I'm taking a shot for my enemies. I can't waste no more time on my energy. I know they know I got it on lock. Go against me, that's a long shot. Cause I'm counting wins all around the clock. Never doubt me, boy, I don't stop. Who do you feel when they make you the monster? I am not scared of none of you imposters. Taking the lead now while they watching. Think you should leave now while the options. Taking no L's, yeah, I gotta win. Watch me kick down the doors, they won't let me in. I'm running the game now. Foot on the gas, can slow down, no.
Welcome to another edition of the It's Cavalier podcast. It's your boy Mac. And today we got to hear from Kenny Atkinson and Koby Altman at their Cavs media day, I guess pre-media day availability session. And man, oh man, if I wasn't excited about this season, I don't even know how much more excited I can get after hearing what I heard from both Koby Altman and Kenny Atkinson. Kenny Atkinson for the most part. And I'm going to keep it real with you guys. Just like many of you out there, no real moves outside of acquiring Jalen Tyson in the draft, bringing Isaac Okoro back, really just bringing everybody back, right? Getting our core under contract for the foreseeable future. Those are all moves within themselves, and it was great to get everybody under contract, but I too still have some of the worries and reservations that everybody else shares in terms of the fit with this current group. But hearing what I heard from Kenny Atkinson and Koby Altman just a few moments ago made me feel great about the direction that this franchise appears to want to head. And we got so much information from that little media day availability. And I get it. You have to kind of take what you get or hear from these sessions with a grain of salt, because a lot of it can be coach or GM speak. But I'm telling you, a lot of what we heard, I really feel like it's going to track. I really feel like it's going to really stand out and stick throughout the duration of the 2024-25 season. Now, right off the bat, one of the things that we heard from Koby Altman today was that they wanted to keep their best players in town, meaning Darius, Garland, Donovan Mitchell, Jarrett Allen, and Evan Mobley. And they were big proponents of continuity here in terms of the roster, which is basically why you see everybody has essentially come back. Even Tristan Thompson has been re-signed. Emoni Bates has been acquired again once more, or handed another two-way. Really, there aren't many guys who are not on this roster who weren't here last year, right? I think Damian Jones. Is Damian Jones the only one? Maybe you guys could let me know. I think that might be the case. But honestly, it's great to have that sense of continuity, because I feel like people often get lost in how important continuity can actually be to a roster. Now, I get entirely different coaching staff that will play a role. I think it's going to help the team out in numerous ways, but having simple continuity among your roster, guys that are familiar with each other, familiar with their play styles and tendencies, I think that type of stuff matters. And to be able to say that you have that from top to bottom while still adding 1 to 2 additional players, I think that's a pretty big deal, in my opinion. And I couldn't be more stoked to be able to see what Kenny Atkinson can get out of this group. One of the things that we heard from Koby Altman in particular today was that the goal is always to win a championship, especially with this group. And they want to win rounds of the playoffs, meaning, they want to see how far they can advance. And the goal is always going to be contend for a title. And I think people got so bogged down in this one particular situation, and that was, I think, the last game of the season, deciding, whether or not the team should win or lose for seeding purposes, things of that nature. That's what I hearken back to when I think about like goals. Is your goal to win a championship? Is it to compete for a title? Or is it simply to, win a first round series? Things of that nature. Secure your job for the next season. I loved the fact that he just flat out mentioned the goal is to win a championship, because I believe that should be everybody's goal. That should be every single franchise's goal, whether you're entering the season with high expectations or no expectations or pressure at all. I think everybody is trying to get to the same place, and that is championship level basketball. And I think the question is, many times, is what does the timeline look like to get there? Do you have a runway to get there? And when the team first acquired Donovan Mitchell, that was like one of the biggest parts of Koby Altman's introductory press conference with Donovan Mitchell, was the timeline and how it got expedited. But there is still a runway. There is still a developmental timeline for many of these players on the roster, and that, the goal is going to be championship, but there's still time to do it. And I think two things can be true. I think you want to compete for that title, but you also have to understand where you are at in that process. But it was good to hear him come out right and say, yeah, we want to win a championship, basically. Because that should never be something that people stray away from or not try to mention. There was a lot of other things said today as well. One in particular, when Kenny Atkinson was asked about Evan Mobley's development in particular, and this is a subject that I'm sure all of us really, really wanted to hear about. We got a lot, right? He asked about the different ways that Evan Mobley will be used more, mentioned about playing 5 out with him on the floor, and wants to allow him to make plays for others in transition and in the half court, and expanding upon his 3-point shooting, right? The spacing of the floor, especially since the front court pairing of Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley is so spacing abhorrent, right? They don't have that ability inherently right now to consistently knock down 3-point shots. And that is going to be one of the next progressions of Evan Mobley's, in particular's, game. And we want to see that. And Kenny Atkinson kind of alluded to that. He touched on that. But the biggest takeaway that I got is they want to get Evan Mobley more touches. Like, they want to allow him to facilitate a little bit more. They want to get him out on the fast break and make plays for others, kick the ball out, drive, things of that nature. They want him to handle the rock, which would essentially allow Darius, Garland, and Donovan Mitchell and some of the other Cavs great shooters, like players like Sam Merrill and Max Strus. It would allow these guys to be off ball a ton more and get a lot more catch and shoot attempts. And especially for Darius and Donovan, I think that's a big deal, because you get some of the gravity that those guys have, and you take it away. You force the defense to keep an eye on Evan Mobley. And obviously, this is going to depend upon the handle a lot, and whether or not Mobley is comfortable with the ball in his hands far more than he had been in the last 3 seasons. But the simple idea of point Mobley, or at least Mobley taking on more ball handling responsibilities, that should excite everybody. Because I think if that 3-point shot is not where you want it to be at in year 4, that is another area that he can impact the game in, getting out in transition. That is why increasing the pace could benefit everybody from top to bottom on this roster, whether they can shoot the 3 ball or not. Guys like Okoro and Jarrett Allen get out in transition, cut to the basket, be seen. So ball handlers like Darius, like Donovan, and apparently now Evan Mobley, so they can be hit in stride. And for the guys out in the corners, the shooters, the guys who will be waiting to receive the ball for those catch and shoot opportunities, it's big time. And getting Evan Mobley in on that action, putting the ball in his hands, getting him more offensive touches and opportunities to, lead the offense, that could potentially yield big time results. And I think that is a huge progression, or at least a huge step that Mobley could possibly take this season under Kenny Atkinson. And I don't know why anybody wouldn't truly be excited about that. It's just, you hear things like that, and it's not something that we often that we were able to see a lot under JB Bickerstaff because of how stagnant the offense could be at times, how bogged down things could be at times. The ball just was not moving. Mobley was not getting nearly the amount of touches or usage that he could probably get. And that's one word that we constantly heard during that media availability session is usage. Kenny Atkinson talked about, increasing Mobley's usage. I don't know how exactly he's going to do it. Maybe he does allow him to facilitate more. Maybe he does get him out in transition and, passing the ball, moving it from left to right and whatnot. But the simple mention of that just truly excites me. And Mobley was not the only person obviously discussed. One of the players that was mentioned in particular, obviously Donovan Mitchell. You're not going to go through a presser, and not talk about your best player right now. And when Atkinson was asked about Donovan Mitchell's next step, he just simply talked about getting him some of the easy shit, right? Getting him some of the easy stuff. And he said that he wants to make life easier for Donovan. And how could you not? Donovan has just been the focal point of this offense. He has so much defensive pressure and gravity on him every single game, every single possession. You want to be able to make life easier on him. And I think a big portion of that is getting other guys touches, right? If you allow Donovan Mitchell to play off ball more, you get him more off ball reps, more off ball catch and shoot opportunities. That could potentially bode well for Donovan Mitchell and, keeping him upright, allowing him the opportunity to kind of just get to his spots, right? Because Donovan putting all that on his body, all those drives to the rim, things of that nature, that can really, really play a role in slowing you down come the postseason. It can really bog you down by putting all that extra mileage on you. So maybe you keep Donovan Mitchell a little bit more healthy and a little bit more upright simply by handing off some of those touches to an Evan Mobley or back to Darius Garland or to maybe Jalen Tyson or Karis LeVert, Craig Porter Jr. There are any number of guards or players on this roster to choose from. And I think getting him, some rest, getting him some of those off-ball reps, allowing him to, get some of that easy stuff per se, that just excites me. I don't know what other way or how else to put it, because as you sit and just and kind of investigate the numbers for Donovan Mitchell last season, I mean, the catch and shoot attempts, 3.1 per game. He shot 40.7% on catch and shoot opportunities last year. And so that, no doubt in my mind, tells me that Donovan Mitchell is fully capable of striking fear into the hearts of defenses. You just have to get him more and more opportunities, more reps. He took a total of 172 total catch and shoot threes last year, knocking down 70 of them. I want to get that number up to around 225, 230. That, to me, that could really help. That could really increase the flow of the offense, make it so that everybody's touching the ball a little bit more and that we're not constantly relying upon Donovan, pulling up or getting to the mid-range area or just straight up knifing into the heart of the defense and attacking off the dribble drives. So getting Donovan off the ball, that could definitely help. Episto says Donovan's still underrated. And I'm at a point right now because I think we all probably watched or listened to some of Donovan's recent interviews or appearances on podcasts, things like that, where he basically has said that he believes himself to be a top 10, 15 player. And I don't know really how you can combat that, right? In my heart of hearts, I believe he is a top 12 guy. You could probably make an argument that he is top 10 for sure, but you want Donovan to have as much confidence in himself as possible. And one of the things that he talked about is, winning a title and, proving things in the playoffs. And I think that he will be able to do that in the Kenny Atkinson era, and during Kenny Atkinson's tenure with the Cavaliers. And that starts during the 2024-25 season. And so I do believe Donovan Mitchell is underrated, but I don't think the general public or just the average NBA fan is going to give him that respect until he has a deep playoff run. Hopefully that starts this year, but I don't know. That's where I'm at with that. Vince Trevino says, anyone have a link to the immediate availability original video? Yeah, so that is, you can find that on a few different YouTube channels right now. I know Write Down Euclid, Evan Damrell and company, they have it up on their YouTube channel. That's where I got the live stream. I also believe that Cavs Insiders, Spencer Davies, if you're familiar, one of the best all around Cavs coverage gentleman around. He also, I believe, has a live stream or at least some coverage of it. So you can find that on his channel or both of those channels. But great place to be at. Sifa Podcast Show says, can't wait for Cavs basketball. Absolutely, man. I'm right there with you. I cannot wait for the 2024-25 season to begin. I know that people feel like this is the exact same team that we have last year, but when I truly sit down and I look at it, I put that to the side because I look at the continuity. I look at getting the core four back and under contract. I look at the addition of Jalen Tyson, a player that I feel will eventually take the place of Karis LeVert at some point in the rotation. I am very excited about Luke Travers finally being brought over. JT Thor to me offers something. Maybe he'll get a few opportunities and just internal development and growth. I think that these things cannot be overstated. And I think getting a offensive minded coach in town, because we've needed one for a while now. I think that is going to pay dividends. And so there, to me, I don't know how you couldn't be excited for this team heading into next season. And look, I get it. Everybody sees the moves that were made for the rest of the Eastern Conference teams, and they're already like, oh well, everybody got better, but the Cavs. Well, I truly don't see it that way. I think that Cleveland, by sheer nature of keeping that continuity intact and changing the coaching staff, I think that will represent a change in a positive way. I think that is going to yield improvement by itself. So I don't know why people are so down about that. Vince Trevino says having a concepts or read and react offense like the Pacers or Warriors is going to reinvigorate this team. Too much play calling probably slowed down offensive development for DG and Mobley. Yeah, I mean, we constantly saw JB Bickerstaff calling out plays and things of that nature that slowed the nature of the game down. That just decreased the pace because you're so isolation dependent. You're so pick and roll heavy. You're spamming the pick and roll so much that you're becoming predictable. And I think that read and react stuff that Kenny Atkinson has deployed, not only his time with Brooklyn, but he got to sit behind Steve Kerr. He's worked with Mike Budenholzer. He's been in numerous locations. And then being a part of the coaching staff over in France, where it just constantly seemed like the ball was moving, that's got to help you from a coaching standpoint. And I think Kenny Atkinson himself has probably developed as a coach, which is a pretty big deal when you think about it, because he really only had one shot at the helm, and that was with Brooklyn in just 4 seasons. And there was a lot to like in his short stint there, coaching that team that was with not nearly as much talent as this team. And so getting some of those concepts that Vince mentions down here, some of those read and react things where you can, have a lot of guys cutting to the basket. You can have your catch and shooters out there making shots. You can have guys coming off screens like Sam Merrill and Max Strus. You can have Mobley facilitating from the elbows. And if if the shot's not open down there, he can easily move the ball to a cutter or back out to another ball handler. There are a lot of different things. You let the defense dictate how the offense is going to flow for you. And I think that is an element of the offense that we just have not had with the Cavs under the JB Bickerstaff era. I expect a lot more DHOs. I expect the pick and roll spamming to be at an all-time low. I expect the ball to be moving from left to right and for everybody to get to, more touches because of it. I expect the pace to be increased. I expect transition play to be at an all-time high. And I think production is going to go up across the board for numerous players because of that, namely Evan Mobley and Darius Garland. I think Max Strus stands to benefit. I think rebounding across the board is going to go up. There's just a lot to like about the idea of what he could potentially bring to the table offensively. Kirk Davis asks, what's JT game like? Never seen him play. I'm assuming you're talking about Jalen Tyson or JT Thor. I don't know. You'll have to clarify for me. So I guess I'll mention both, right? JT Thor has the size to play the 4 or 5. He also has latent spacing ability. If you haven't already, I posted a montage, a clip montage of every single career triple that JT Thor has made throughout his career. And it's a pretty lengthy video. It's a lot longer than I thought it was going to end up being by the time of completing it, but it shows you just how prevalent that floor spacing ability that he has is. That if somebody can finally tap into that on a consistent basis, I think that it could potentially get him an opportunity at the NBA level and not necessarily just on a two-way contract with the Charge. And so he also is a quality shot blocker. He can protect the rim, but I have to admit, like, I don't know how much of that is going to translate to a better team, right? A good team, a team that may not be able to afford him so many opportunities like he was given over with Charlotte, who is just on a completely different tier in terms of competitiveness and having a roster around you that's going to push everybody else. So I don't know if JT Thor will get the opportunities that he was once afforded with Charlotte, but I do like what I've seen seen from his game, and I'll be very interested to see in preseason and whatever opportunities that he does get earlier on in the season. I'll be very interested to see what that looks like in a Cavalier capacity. Um, Jalen Tyson, I think you probably were talking about JT Thor, so I probably won't even dive into Jalen, because if you haven't seen Jalen by now, my best bet for you would be to go check out his summer league tapes, which are also posted. But man, there was just so much mentioned at this presser. One of the things that really caught my attention and should probably catch all of yours too is the fact that Kenny Atkinson mentioned that he planned to actually use the depth that we have. He says he's really, celebrating our depth, and he's going to play 10 to 11 guys, maybe even 11 guys right off the bat. That should excite every single one of you out there, because Koby, and I keep mentioning Koby, JB Bickerstaff was notorious for riding 7 to 8 man rotations, even when we were at full strength. I get why you might want to do that. I get the allure with that in the postseason. Don't get me wrong, because all rotations tend to shorten come the playoffs. But you have to play an 82 game regular season before you get to the playoffs. And JB was constantly running these guys into the ground. I don't necessarily believe that all of it is his fault, right? Because you can never account for every injury that occurs. There will always be the possibility of an injury, no matter how few or how many minutes a guy gets. It can happen at the drop of a hat. But what happens is you increase the chances of said injury by playing specific guys too much or too frequently, or putting them in positions where they probably shouldn't be. And so a big part of not doing that is getting the most out of your depth, going deeper into your roster, deeper into your rotation, because there are numerous players on this roster, one that Pesta just kind of alluded to down here, that deserved minutes last year, or at the very least deserved more minutes than they were actually given last year. And one of those players is Sam Merrill, the Mormon Missile, as Pesta is mentioned him here. Is going to thrive under a real offense, especially where he can come around screens, come off screens, get on the move. Just let that off-ball movement kind of aid and provide gravity to others, right? And so I think Sam is the perfect player for this upcoming regime change in terms of the coaching staff. But my main point is that you have to be able to find ways to get your players that are on the bench into the game more often than they had in the past, right? Under JB, constantly a constant theme to see no more than maybe 8 or 9, if we're lucky, players into our regular season game. even in a blowout at times. I never truly understood it. Now, if Kenny is really not bullshitting us and telling us the truth, playing 10, 11 deep, there are a lot of options the Cavs can roll with to keep the starters healthy, right? Past Darius, Donovan, Max, Evan, and Jarrett, you have a bench that now has Craig Porter Jr., who is on a standard deal now. Ty Jerome is still around. Karis LeVert is out there. Isaac Okoro has been re-signed. Jalen Tyson, the incoming rook. Dean Wade, a very underrated player in his own right. George Niang, who is due for a bounce-back season, who I think he probably will get one under Kenny. Tristan Thompson, Emoni Bates, Luke Travers, JT Thor, right? And I know I'm forgetting somebody. I always do. But at the end of the day, my point is that you have a lot of depth to choose from. Now, whether or not you're one of those fans out there that believe that the Cavaliers, their roster, their depth just is non-existent, they don't have players who warrant minutes, I disagree, right? I vehemently disagree because I feel like there are some studs on this team. I think the problem for this team over the last 3 years has been health. I think the majority of it has been guys staying healthy. And one of the biggest ways you can adjust to that or help keep guys fresher is to give more guys opportunities. Shorten the loads on the starters, shorten the loads on your high end reserves, right? I mean, we talked all night and day about the likes of George Niang and how he was kind of played probably too much last year, probably given too much of a role, and how much of a detriment that can be to not only the team, but to the player in particular, because George was often played out of position at times. He was given just too many minutes per game. He ended the 2023-24 season with 22.3 minutes per game. There is no way in hell that in the 2024-25 campaign that George Niang, of all players, should be playing that much. 15 to 18 minutes per game. We talk about a player like Sam Merrill, who, likewise, at times he got a lot of minutes, but his problem was on the other end of town, right? He was not given enough, and he was not given minutes consistently. During the 2023-24 season, Sam Merrill only played 17 and a half minutes per game, and there were numerous periods of time where he was logging DNPs or playing less than 15 minutes per game. Now, I get it. He's a shorter guy out there playing a guard position and on a team that is stacked at guard, but there's got to be ways that you can find extra minutes for a player like Sam Merrill, who is one of the best three-point marksmen in the league. I think Kenny Atkinson will be able to adjust and provide him with those opportunities. And so those are two clear examples right there where you have guys with specific skill sets that you need, right? 3-point shooting, whether it be Niang or Merrill, that you can utilize. But it's about getting those correct lineup combinations, which is something else that, Kenny Atkinson mentioned when referencing Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell and the defensive fit there, and whether or not, you can win with the short backcourt and defense. And one of the things that Kenny mentioned was that it is about the three other players that are around them. And so that goes to show you right there that it is all about lineup combinations and finding extra opportunities for guys on your bench. It all goes hand in hand. And keeping these guys healthy and finding specific combos that work for you and keeping everybody fresh. And so I'm very, very excited about the prospect of Kenny Atkinson playing 10 to 11 deep at times to begin the season. And I'm sure as the year goes on that is probably going to shorten, as it should. You want to nail down who your best 8 to 9 guys are, especially in a playoff setting. But there's no reason why you should be playing that few in your rotation come, at least during the regular season. That's how I feel. It sounds like that's what Kenny seems to feel as well. And I think that this is going to bode well for everybody on the roster. And then in terms of that core four, one of the things that Koby mentioned was that there's way more data that speaks to the core four working than it not working, right? He said you don't fluke your way into 99 wins over the last 2 seasons, and that he mentioned in an interview with Atkinson that he was very excited about the roster and wanted to embrace the core four rather than break it up, which is what a lot of fans and pundits are expecting the Cavaliers to do. I mean, they're still expecting the Cavaliers to do that right now, even though Jarrett Allen, Evan Mobley, and Donovan Mitchell were handed contract extensions this offseason. People are still expecting the Cavaliers to make a move that breaks up this core four during the season. I cannot tell you how many times I've already interfaced with people that believe that one of Darius Garland or Jarrett Allen will be moved by the deadline. And listen, I'm not going to bullshit you here. I don't know the terms of the contract in terms of when certain players can be traded, but I do believe that they will be eligible come the trade deadline. But do I see either of them being moved? No. I think that you see what you have in this core for at least one more year. And I think that's what Koby Altman and company have elected to do. And you see how far they can take you. Because like I mentioned before, their problem has not necessarily been the fit all the time. I get it, but Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley not being able to space the floor consistently together and having the front court and the paint bogged down and clogged, yes, that has its disadvantages. But there is way more evidence, as Koby suggested, that it works than it doesn't. And the problem primarily to me has just been availability. These dudes have just not been healthy, like at all. And at the most crucial times. Jarrett Allen, for instance, playing 4 games, I believe, against, was it 4? It was either 4 or 5 games in that Orlando series before he went down. And then Donovan Mitchell following suit in the following series against Boston in a series where, a lot of people thought the Cavaliers were never going to win anyway. But not having 2 of your core 4 out there, how can you use that against the Cavaliers to say that the core doesn't work when you're only playing with 2 or at least or half of your core at that point in Darius Garland and Evan Mobley? I mean, I don't get it. And, thankfully there are people out here that keep track of this sort of thing, like in terms of possession. Shout out to Justin Rowan, Chasedown pod. He's got that data pulled up. The core 4 combo and data for 2022 through 2024 for Garland, Mitchell, Allen, and Mobley. They've played 2,548 possessions together with an offensive rating of 118.5. That's the highest among a lot of these lineups. The defensive rating that they have is 110.7 for a net rating of 7.8. It works, folks. It works. There is a lot of evidence to suggest that this core 4 can get the job done together. The problem has been they just haven't been able to log those minutes when it truly counts. They've been through 2 postseasons now together. They've had 3 series, and they have never finished with all 4 of those core 4 together. I suppose they have, right? There's the series against the Knicks, but that's one series. When you're talking about not having Jarrett for the rest of that Orlando series, when you're talking about not having Donovan and Jarrett against Boston, it really just shows you, yes, we need these guys out here to be able to say definitively it doesn't work. And we just haven't been able to see that at the capacity. And I get that there's always going to be the opportunity or chance for injury due to the nature of the game, how often it's played. But I think that you had enough, at least from a statistical standpoint, to give it one more go around and see if a new coach can get something more out of this team than the previous regime was able to get. And I think that was the right decision. So credit to Koby Altman for bringing the core 4 back and not bending to all the, the public pressure and the outside NBA community. And I'm just glad everybody's back. Another thing that was mentioned during this availability session was Darius Garland not really getting enough credit out there, and doesn't get enough credit for being the longest tenured member of the Cavs. That's what's being mentioned here. But all I know is that from a Darius Garland standpoint, when I see the discourse surrounding him, it gets ridiculous at times, because a lot of people forget that the 2022-23 season he had was absolutely phenomenal. He followed up that all-star 2021-22 season with perhaps an even better and more efficient 2022-23. And people like to act like that shit just did not happen at all, and immediately jumped to 2023-24, admittedly a disappointing season for him. But when you're talking about just how good of a player Darius Garland is, I think people forget just how good that he can actually be. And I get the counter argument to that as well. Can he actually be that player alongside Donovan Mitchell? I think that he can. I think we saw that in 2022, 23. I just think that injuries, namely last season, and a combination of experience and just not being ready for the moment, i.e., the Knicks series, uh, made it seem that these two cannot coexist. But as Kenny said, there's no reason why two players that function like this, right? Two players that can shoot, two players that can pass and are excellent facilitators, two players that can, lead a team cannot be successful when we have seen smallish cards, smallish backcourts work in the past. And I think one of the examples that Kenny pointed to was his time with Golden State out there with Jordan Poole and Steph Curry. There are different examples that you can point to, maybe not at such a high level, right? Because Jordan Poole and Darius Garland, just two completely different types of players. It's ditto for Steph Curry. But I think that there are still solid examples that you can pull from if you really try to dig into the treasure trove of NBA history. A guy that got a mention today that we don't often hear about, Ty Jerome. Koby Altman mentioned that Ty Jerome had a really good offseason and that he's been in consideration as the MVP of September, which, again, he said he reiterated that it didn't matter, but that he's been balling in September. And you love to hear that because Ty, man, when he was brought in last year, I was ecstatic, especially after watching him throttle the Cavs this season prior and then only getting to see him for 2 games. That shit hurt, right? I was a big believer that the size and the shooting ability that he had was going to actually bring some to the table for the Cavs. That at that point were without Ricky Rubio due to the the mental issues or the mental health situation that he was going through at the time. And then Craig Porter Jr. being an unproven up to that point outside of a stellar summer league appearance. And so I thought that Ty Jerome was actually going to be a big part of the 2023-24 iteration of the Cavs. And turns out he wasn't, right? Stayed healthy for just 2 games. And so like I had mentioned in my evaluation or rather expectation video for the guards, my expectation for Ty Jerome is to I jokingly said play more than 2 games, but I really meant that shit when I say stay healthy, provide spacing when he's asked to come out into the rotation, but mainly just stay healthy. And so it was nice to hear Ty Jerome be mentioned. And when they were asked about training camp, Altman mentioned that the team, having their training camp in IAG Academy. One of the quotes that he gave was that we're hopeful on our friends down in Sarasota and Bradenton and IMG are doing well after the hurricane, and that I think they still planned on doing that. But he pointed to Cleveland's own struggle with bad weather, saying that his power had been off for 5 days during that period of time, which you guys all remember that. It was big news, and a lot of people were struggling with some of the power outages, which is crazy to me. One of the things that was mentioned is that the team's trip to Paris for the Cavs, to Paris for the Olympics, that was pretty damn awesome. And that they were really able to, it wasn't for the Olympics, but I'm sure you guys all remember that. Their trip to Paris was really, really good for just solidifying chemistry and whatnot. He said, it was big for them and they want to try and replicate that. And I think that's pretty dope. I think the team should take more international trips. It was when we got the cool montage of like all the Cavs gear, the jackets and stuff like that, and them taking pictures in front of the Eiffel Tower. And it was just a lot going on. So it was pretty cool. And you got to hear some from the fan base over in France and whatnot, and pretty damn cool. Tax apron stuff. He said that they are willing to go into the tax apron, but it's more about when the right time would be to do so. He said he did not believe it this year, but never say never, right? So what I take from that is the team, obviously, as we have come to know, Dan Gilbert and company, they don't really fret over paying the price tag when it comes to the luxury tax, right? If the team feels that the time is right, then they will go out and do that. But it's all about said timing and capitalizing on these rookie scale contracts, capitalizing on the contract extensions when they're going to kick in and the timing of that. That is important when you're talking about when you're going to start your tax clock and paying that luxury tax and the repeater tax and all the things that have to do with luxury tax implications. When you're talking about jumping into that, you have to know, or at least at the very least, you have to believe that the time is right. And it sounded like Koby knows that that is coming, but it is not exactly right now. It is not exactly this season, especially with the CBA being what it is, because now that all of these guys have been paid and the contracts they're coming, right? They will kick in fairly soon. Surrounding the star or the core four with surrounding talent that can actually compete and be impactful, that becomes increasingly more difficult under this new CBA, which is, that's a whole nother conversation for another day. But you can understand why they might want to try and push that out for as long as possible. Kirk Davis says down here, Dan got that bank. That's why he don't care. Yeah, I mean, I wish I was in that position too, to, just say fuck it and, go over that luxury tax, pay millions of dollars. But we're lucky to have an owner that is not cheap in that sense, because there are owners across, major sporting, the major sports in America that do operate that way. And when I think about that, I think about, was it Mike Brown with the Bengals? There are a couple others out there that just kind of seem like they're very, very stringent in terms of breaking the bank to keep talent in-house, especially internally developed talent. Jeff Wishes says core 6, DG, Spida, Mo, Big Al, and Luke Travers with 6-man ice. It is the way forward into next year, or realize throughout. If we find a play style lineups that win with Kenny and Okoro, we got to stay locked. Yeah. And, I'm not going to sit here today and put together my rotation, but what I can tell you is this. I know that the core four are going to log a lot of minutes this year. I know that Max Strus is probably going to play just as big as roles he had last year. And then the bench, that is where things really could get a little hectic, because Kenny is already saying you want to play 10 to 11 deep to keep some of these starters healthy, at least to begin the season. That could mean that you're pulling minutes from the starters, which is, you want to be able to do that. You don't want your starters playing heavy minutes. But when you're talking about how many minutes exactly these guys get, I don't know. Right. I really, really don't know, because as much as people want to talk about redundancy, positional redundancy in particular on this team, there are some ways around that. Right. You play guys at more natural positions in terms of size and whatnot, and where they're most comfortable at, or what they have done in the past. And you try and get the most out of lineups that way. And so we know we can probably pencil in Karis LeVert at least to begin the season. He's probably going to enter the season as the team's 6th man. So he's probably going to log the most minutes off the bench. We really hope that Sam Merrill gets more minutes. The problem is, if Karis LeVert, Max Strus, Jalen Tyson, Isaac Okoro, and some of the other options on the roster, Craig Porter Jr., he throw him in there too. You don't know where all of these minutes are going to come from, right? You don't know where. And that's why people point to that positional redundancy a lot, especially when you consider the fact that Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland, they're probably going to occupy a lion's share of the lead guard duties. So when one is in lineups where both of them are on the court, this doesn't matter. But in lineups where one of them, in lineups where you need a lead guard out there, one of them is probably always going to be on the court, whether that be Darius or Donovan. And after watching Donovan make the way that he did last year, kind of hard to not want to see more of that, right? If I'm not mistaken, I think I had it written down over here. Donovan Mitchell actually averaged 7.1 assists in games without Darius Garland in the lineup last year. We know that he is a fucking brilliant playmaker out there. We know that he is every bit the level of playmaker that Darius is out there. Maybe not 1-to-1, but it is very, very close in my opinion. And One of the developments in chemistry that we saw really pay dividends last year was his connection with Sam Merrill, in particular. Some of the DHO stuff, some of the bending the defense, coming off of dribble drives and kicking out to the corners for Sam, or literally seeing Sam come around screens and Donovan being able to find him that way. You saw a lot of that chemistry being developed last year, and I think that's going to play a big role. Jeff says, I really think Strus is great, but Luke Travers, the small forward of the future, in my opinion, eventually. Here's my problem with that. Luke Travers, as of right now, is not enough of a reliable catch and shoot guy. He's not really a reliable 3-point shooter at this point in his career. His statistics with Perth and in Melbourne United and even at Summer League, it's really been all over the place. Piss poor from 3-point distance at Summer League. I think he's now been in 15 Summer League appearances, and let me tell you, Jeff, it's not been great. He is over the course of 15 Summer League games, he is just 6 of 31 from 3-point distance, or rather 19.4%. So it's kind of hard to envision, at least for me, like this season. It's hard for me to envision Luke being that guy this year without having that ability to shoot. And, this is why people make the argument for Caris LeVert at times, because of how we know that Caris LeVert is a phenomenal player in his own right. We know that he can do a lot of different things, but one of the biggest reasons that Max Strus is starting over a player like Isaac Okoro or Caris LeVert is because of that off-ball shooting, that catch and shoot ability, being able to be effective without the ball in your hands. And I just don't think Luke is at that level at this point in his career. And so until I can realistically see Luke Travers taking, 5-6 triples per game out at the three, I just don't see that being the possibility. I think that we need to see progression from him with the charge. And I do believe in Luke. I'm a huge fan. I think there's a lot of versatility there, but the player that starts at the three needs to be able to shoot the three ball, especially until one of Jarrett Allen or Evan Mobley or somebody else that is not currently on the roster yet, if they make a move, and until another member of the front court can space the floor. HJ17 says, I fucking love the Kenny hire. Sorry for my language. No problem with that. I love the Kenny hire too. I think a lot of people are underrating just how important or how significant a role that a coaching staff can play in the development of a team and a team taking that next step. I mean, the perfect example that people love to throw out there all the live long day is Mark Jackson and Steve Kerr. I don't think it's 1-to-1 here. It is great that Kenny has experience working alongside Steve Kerr. But my thing is, like, I think that the coaching style, the differences, the stylistic differences between what JB Bickerstaff like to do in terms of having a heliocentric offense and having a slow-paced offense, and what Kenny Atkinson has routinely done at his time at the helm with Brooklyn and leading the league in 3-point opportunities, or being in the top 5 for 3-point attempts 4 straight years, and then having a top 10, 11 pace in the league every single year there. That's just the antithesis of what JB did there. So I love it too, man. I really do. HJ also says, but I would trade LeVert in at the deadline if Tyson is playing similar to his summer league stats. Maybe try to snag Cam Johnson or DFS if they are available for cheap. I'll be keeping an eye on the Caris LeVert thing, because I've consistently said I do believe that this is probably going to be Caris LeVert's last year in Cleveland for numerous reasons. 1, because he's on an expiring deal. 2, because I truly do not see him taking a massive pay cut, which I think he would probably be required to do. I think the Cavs probably would ask him to do if he, if they like him enough to want to keep him around past this season. And 3, because I think that it will open the door for the logjam of players that could potentially get minutes there, whether that be Jalen Tyson, who a lot of people believe, including myself, will end up taking that role, or maybe divvying those minutes up between players like Craig Porter Jr., Tyson, Isaac Okoro, et cetera, et cetera. And that's without even mentioning Travers, which probably could stand to benefit from Caris being moved as well, because he is probably going to see the lion's share of the minutes off the bench. Kirk says, do you think Tyson will eventually get a starting job this season? No. Um, Hopefully that's not sacrilege to say that, but again, I just have not seen him. He would have to really get back to his roots of being a catch and shoot specialist, being an off-ball threat like he was at Texas Tech, in order for me to really see a possibility in him unseating Max Strus. And the one thing that I keep coming back to, because I do realize like having the ability to create offense, which Jalen Tyson clearly has. I think he's an underrated defender. I think he's an excellent rebounder for his size at 6'5", 6'6". I think that having those things is great, but until I see a real tangible difference in how frequently he takes that 3-point shot, I just can't see it, because I truly believe that anybody that starts at the 3 for the Cavs has to be able to be a volume shooter. And I just don't see Tyson as that just yet. Maybe that comes in the next year or two, but I think that would probably, and this is just my opinion, I'm not going to say it won't happen. I just don't think it will based upon that. I think that they like what they have with Max Strus in that regard. And I think just having that ability to be impactful without the ball in your hands like Strus does is important, no matter if there is a size disadvantage with Strus or not. Jeff Wishes says Travers' playmaking for the guards and big, and his defense and rebounding is super glue. And the high IQ, I think he'll hit open shots. Him being with talent will open stuff up. Too many intangibles to me. Yeah. And again, I think that Luke is the quintessential, or at least has the possibility of becoming the quintessential NBA glue guy. The problem is that he, to me, in order to be a real rotation caliber wing in the NBA these days, you typically have to be able to shoot respectably. Just have not seen that from him on a consistent basis. There have been blips on the radar. You know, he had a pretty good shooting season with Perth, I believe, not this year, but the year before last. And then with Melbourne United, that sunk way back down. And then again, his 3-point shooting with the Cavs in 15 career summer league appearances hasn't been all that eye-popping at all. Again, it's just, I think, what I say, 6-31 in over 15 career summer league appearances. Till he can do that, think you have to kind of roll with some of the options that are ahead of him. Just let him develop. But I'm very excited about having him over. I will be paying attention. I watched a lot of Charge games over the last 2 seasons, but I'll be watching even more this year because of who is down there with Emoni and Luke and JT and assuming that we probably see Gabe Osabuyan and some of the others there too. Episto says if Ty Jerome is healthy, that can make the Cavs make Karras movable. Karras was the only option who could dribble at times last year. Yeah. And this is why we talk about having guys who can, handle, guys who can create their own offense, guys who can, just be facilitators out there is so important. And why we often feel like you can never have too many, because we have been in the position of not having really any at all outside of Darius and Donovan, Karras. Now we potentially have Ty, we have Karras, we have JT, we have Donovan, and we have Darius. And you could probably throw Max Strus in there too, because one of the things that we saw last year is that Max is completely comfortable handling the rock, especially in a secondary capacity. And I think the Cavaliers have made strides in trying to adjust that area. But again, this does boil down to health. It does boil down to guys being effective in the roles that they're already in. And maybe we see Karras become expendable by the trade deadline. If I was a betting man, which I am, I would say that this is Karras's last year in Cleveland, but you can never know these things for sure. I love Caris LeVert. I have been a huge fan, a huge supporter of him since he's been here, but I think that the benefit of moving him might exceed the value of keeping him at some point this year. We'll see. HJ17 Gaming says, how do you think the Cavs are going to address the backup big situation? I love Double T, but I think they need to go for someone young if they become available. Frankly, I don't know, man. Like, I think that they'll probably look at the buyout market. Maybe they look at the trade deadline, harkening back to Caris LeVert or somebody else on the roster. Maybe they elect to give JT Thor a real chance this year. But a lot of that is going to depend upon how JT is developing with the Charge. It's going to depend upon how often Kenny feels like the staggering of Evan and Jarrett, alongside George and Dean, how effective that can be. We don't even really know like what that is going to look like. If Kenny is opting to go 10 or 11 deep, one could only assume that they're probably going to try and get Tristan Thompson out there as much as they possibly can to keep both Jarrett and Evan healthy. But that's just an assumption. Maybe they address it during the season. Maybe they don't. Maybe they feel like being, playing small with one of Jarrett or Evan out there at all times at the 5 or is the way to go, with having shooting around them at the 4, whether that be George, whether that be Dean, or some other option that they feel comfortable with at some point during the season. I think you could probably even make a realistic case in spot minutes that you can probably maybe even play Jalen Tyson some at the 4 because of his rebounding ability. But that's just me spitballing. I really don't know. Pista says the backup big situation is horrifying. I think it could be worse. It is. It's not great, right? Because you're talking about Tristan Thompson, who, prior to his PED suspension last year, was looking like a renewed guy, right? Looking like he had tapped into the fountain of youth. But of course, we all know why that was. And I think we all questioned when he came back, like, how much of that shit was the juice that you're on, or, the supplement that you were taking, and how much of it was just literally you being you, or you being the player that you once were, semblances of that showing itself once again. And I think we kind of got our answer. So yes, it is a little scary, but I think that the Cavaliers are banking on the staggering of Evan and Jarrett to get through this season. And if they can stay healthy, if Kenny plays more than 8-9 players during the regular season, for the duration of the season, I think that you're probably going to be okay at that position. But we'll see. All I know is that it was a very exciting media availability session, and I know I didn't quite cover everything that was said, but man, it was good to hear from not only Koby Altman, but especially from Kenny Atkinson. And he kind of alluded to some of the things that we have all been thinking, or at least all been wanting, i.e. getting Evan Mobley more touches, making him more of a focal point of the offense. And I'll close with saying this. I think that we have long believed as a fan base, the Cavaliers can reach their apex if Mobley takes strides towards becoming their best player. If he is not their best player, if he gets to being the legitimate number 2 on this team, I think that people, and I'm not saying that's going to happen this year. I don't expect it to. I fully expect that Darius Garland is probably still going to be the second best player on the roster come the end of the 2024-25 season. But if Evan Mobley can take steps towards becoming that second best player, or perhaps even their best player, who knows what the ceiling is for this team? Who knows how good this team can be? And I think that we all want them to start moving in that direction. And that starts with giving Mobley more touches and getting him more comfortable with handling the rock. And I think Kenny is realistically going to do that. I think that a lot of things that were said today are actually going to apply. As I said when I first opened, you have to kind of take a lot of the things that are said during media day coverage with a grain of salt, but you can parcel through some of the bullshit and pull out real answers. And I think Kenny gave a lot of realness today, and that is refreshing. With that said, if you like to support the podcast, you know how you can. Consider becoming a member over on Patreon. If you'd like to reach out, you know how you can. It's Cavalier Pod on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and more. Go Cavs.